Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm Kadon Douglas. I'm the executive director of BIPOC TV and Film. We're based in Toronto, but serve Black, Indigenous, and people of color working in the film and television industry across Canada. BIPOC TV and Film started in 2012 as the brainchild of Natalie Younglai, who is a writer, producer, located here in Toronto as well. Natalie is an Asian Caribbean individual and has a very interesting and colorful heritage as well, being of an Asian background, but with family roots in the Caribbean, Trinidad to be specific. So Natalie and a group of her colleagues decided to form a collective that to support, to amplify, to recognize BIPOC individuals working within film and television in Toronto. So that's why I started in 2012, and since then the organization has really grown into quite a force, creating space for ourselves. That includes in terms of safe spaces where we could share our experiences, but also opportunities for us to share our learnings, to share tips of survival in the industry, and also to collaborate with each other. So a lot of that has come out of the organization over the years. The main pillars that we work on are advocacy, um, that in terms of advocacy work, outreach, education and mentoring, and then a lot of networking because of the way in which our industry is set up. It's very relationship focused. So, and that determines who has access, who knows what's happening in terms of opportunities as well, and also who's funded. So, a lot of our work focuses on that type of work, specifically in increasing representation of diverse crew, creative talent in front of and behind the screen. In last year, the organization took quite a leap um, coming out of last year. What we saw coming up to the surface was anti-Asian racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and anti-Black racism that was festering and been festering for decades. Um, but last year, in terms of the death of George Floyd, that was a real catalyst to the movement. Um, and it's funny because sometimes I say that a lot of what we're seeing now in terms of the changes, in terms of the initiatives, is born out of the murder of a Black man. But it's deeper than that, because if we were not in a pandemic, would it have received such notoriety? So last year was a really unique time for our communities and then for the organization as well. So what we saw, the organization moved on to get nonprofit status. We were getting a flood of donations coming in, people wanting to support BIPOC artists and professionals. And we also launched Hire BIPOC, which is our online staffing database. It was busy as usual. Um, what I've learned, so up until 2019, I was in the visioning committee, which is now the board. But I focused more on industry relations as opposed to my colleagues who did a lot of work around programs and events. One of the unique things that came out of last year was during the summer, we put out a call out for people to donate towards a fund to purchase screenwriting software for Black creators. Out of that, we raised an enormous amount of money for that. And then Final Draft came in and donate. Final Draft came in, and I think Movie Magic came in to actually offer that to us, offer us some licenses that we could share with the community. So we decided to use the funds that were donated then towards a drama writing intensives for the Black and Indigenous community. And so that's the program that we're running right now, which goes on till April. So for that one, that's one of the things that came out of last year. What came out of it too is companies and so on coming directly to us to ask, how can we support? What kind of real change can we effect here? And one company in particular came forward, Hollywood Suite, and supported us in getting our nonprofit status. Getting nonprofit status was a huge game changer for the organization, because now we could access provincial and federal funding. We could start chatting. We could start negotiating sponsorships and financial partnerships as well. And so, in terms of the doors that it opened up for us, part of it too was with the Canada Media Fund and the Black and POC fund that was created by them to support our organizations in terms of capacity building, so that we could do the work that we need to do for the next few years. And that's really one of the ways in which BIPOC TV and Film was able to hire staff. And for now, that's me as executive director coming out of that. And so what we saw were huge commitments being made. But the difference was that it was done in consultation with the community. And that's what's been missing for such a long time, in terms of programs, initiatives being created for us without our input. That many times these things are created as a publicity stunt. They're a marketing effort. They're that the benefit is greater for the company who is supporting that, as opposed to the communities. So that was a huge difference that we saw. And my hope is that continues. I often say that right now we're not accepting anything for us without us. If you want to make change, we have to be at that table too. It's going to impact our lives, our futures. So I think last year really provided us the platform to speak through our grief, to speak through our trauma, and to finally be heard for it. So that's why it was such a watershed moment for us. And just hope to see that continue. Like, we want lasting change. So prior to when I started this year, BIPOC TV and Film has been for almost 10 years a 100% volunteer run organization. The members of our visioning committee / board and all of our committees, all of our volunteers, they're all creatives working in the sector. They're professionals working at different levels within the sector as well. So for a long time, it was people giving their time for that. And I think that's one of the great, that's one of our greatest assets, is that we are community first, that we have created that. So before, it was like volunteering and people just volunteering their time. And I remember when I was on the visioning committee, one of the things I loved was people were so moved to action. So it was like, okay, wow, we want to do this. Let's go see how we can do it, So really, a really mobilized community. That's what supported the organizations for all these years. Now with me on as executive director, we're making like a slight transition without completely abandoning our roots. So even like a typical day for me is even just like setting up meetings with different partners and sponsors, meeting with community members as well, because as much as I'm taking funders and a non-BIPOC organization to task, as in nothing for us without us, I'm also using that with our relationship with the community. So right now, in terms of our programming, we are running 2 programs right now. We have a kids TV writing boot camp. They meet twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. and that program's been running since January. We have about 25 people participating in that. We also have a drama writing intensive that came from that fund last year. So we have 8 screenwriters in that program right now, all matched with mentors who are showrunners or experienced writers in the industry. And our goal is to find paid opportunities for at least 2 of those writers. A big thing for us, and I really think for me too, and a cause that I will really push and be very annoying about, is paid opportunities, advancement opportunities. And I did a fellowship at Hot Docs. And out of that, we got a chance to interview for internships with production companies. I went on 8 interviews, got called back for all of them, but only one offered to pay me. And I took it not just because they offered to pay, which for me also that was a big part of the decision. But it's also what that shows, that commitment, that respect for my professional skills. I am bringing something to the table when I come into that space. And it wasn't a lot. Like, I really just got paid $600 for a 6-week internship. But out of that, I ended up getting a full-time role with the company. And I stayed there for a couple years. In that role, I was mentored daily. So I got a chance to learn about documentary research and editing, producing, directing. It was like being in film school for that time. But that initial investment in my professional development meant so much to me, and that allowed me to be able to fully participate in that. At that time, I'm a single mother, and that $600, that was enough for me to buy some groceries and pay for a bus pass. And that made such a difference, because then I could participate fully, without having to juggle a whole bunch of other roles at the same time. So I think sometimes just like even a little bit goes a long way with it as well. But we really need to start thinking about what kind of further injustices we feed into with unpaid opportunities. Too often we get held back into this in entry level roles. We get held into this label of emerging, and that creates further inequity in our industry, because if you're not able to advance, then you're not able to increase your income. If you cannot increase your income, you end up getting stuck in a rut. Then you can't meet your needs. It also affects what types of decisions you make for yourself and or your family. So it's my thing, just like, I want people to get paid positions. I want people to also have opportunity for career growth as well. And so these are things that are very, very important to us. Out of the people who've done the kids TV writing program, so many got their first writing credit from it. There was a young man who was featured on CBC recently. I believe he did a segment with Sesame Street. He did our kids TV writing program a couple of years ago. And people because what we provide is not just the learning, but it's the networking part of it, bringing in people with experience, with decision-making powers into the room as well. So our communities get access to that. So that's what's happening in terms of programming right now. And then we're just going to build over the next few months. I wish I could give like a regular into like, what does a day look like? But it does we're just going with the flow of it, but building strategically simultaneously. It's so funny, like being being interviewed by Mass Culture now because your executive director, Robin Sokolowski, she was my boss back in 2011 when she was ED of Playwrights Guild of Canada. And that again was somebody taking a chance on me. That job I applied, it was with communications coordinator. I knew I had never worked in that capacity before. My background was more in arts outreach and administration. But took that opportunity. I remember the first time she was just like, "Oh, you have to write a press release," and I'm like, "Okay then," and Googled how to write a press release, and put something together. Also had to learn how to use Mailchimp. That was also very early days of businesses using social media to do their outreach and engagement too. Um, but I found myself in a very nurturing environment, in a safe space. Um, and then coming out of that, that's really when I made a decision that I have a full commitment to working in the arts sector, in the arts and cultural sector, because I got to see firsthand how it works, best practices for managing an arts organization. Also got to learn about the different arts councils, funding opportunities too. So coming out of that, I mean, it started to shape the type of future that I was building. One of the biggest things with that opportunity is that it gave me an opportunity to grow in my outreach work. And then I saw, whoa, where do I see myself in the industry? And I knew I'm not an artist per se, but I'm more of a facilitator for artists and more of a supporter for them. Um, so coming out of that, I did for a short time a networking series called Barter. I was like, did that and put it together. That was all like completely self-funded, buying fruits and veggies and chopping them up, buying them in Chinatown and doing that type of work. Um, and then just using the power of social media to reach out to people to say, hey, I'm doing this, and negotiating with speakers. Um, Even the AGO offered me free space to host these. So a really great opportunity for me. And it's until after that, like in 2012, that's when I started pursuing a career in film and television. Um, so I did a program with Manifesto. That one was, I believe it was a 12-week program for aspiring filmmakers. So did that one. So many people who I met then as instructors, I know them better now. I've been following their work for years. Some of them I'll happily call colleagues because we may have collaborated in some way. And out of that opportunity, that's when it was through a partnership with Manifesto that Hot Docs created the Doc Accelerator. That was my first fellowship, and where that internship came from. And I tell people all the time, like, my first job in the film and television industry was as a social media intern. That was my first job in it. But I was coming into it with so much experience in terms of community outreach, which is essential in documentary. I had a background in the nonprofit sector. Again, that's a very useful skill. Um, Useful skill in documentary, along with grant writing. So I had to take a really good look at was what skills I was bringing into the sector. Um, so did that for a couple years. Um, did a lot of professional development, a lot, a lot of that, and went out to everything, networked. I'm better at networking online because honestly, much more of an introvert in person. Um, so online allows you to create your own persona, and engage on your own terms. So I'm very fortunate to be growing into the industry at this time in the digital age. Um, and I think after that, after I did all of that work, freelance for a while, did some documentary research, and a lot of work in terms of digital marketing, digital audience engagement. So just bringing, you see, like how it was just marrying all of those skills, um, and creating something of value to the industry. Um, and and I always tell people to look out for opportunities and trends, and I think that's one of my superpowers, being able to spot trends. um, because coming into the industry, the year that I did starting as a social media intern, that was when the Canada Media Fund made it mandatory for English documentary films to have a digital media component. So it was a skill that was high in demand but low in supply. So I was able to position myself in that way. Um, so worked in documentary up until 2016, until I started working at Women in Film and Television. And that's where I was until last year, before I took a break from the industry and went to Ryerson University to work as a manager of marketing and communication. So that's my resume for you, but I even say, like, for the opportunities that I've had, um, there something that connects all of them is relationships. It's it's that, um, because when I started applying for different documentary freelance jobs, and people would see who I've worked with before, you know, that increased their trust level in terms of bringing me on. Then the relationship that I would build on that place, it opened me up to another opportunity. I remember when I was working with one director. While I was working with her, another colleague of hers took me on to work to work on their project. And then while I was there, another colleague of that person contacted me to come and take on a 3-month contract. Um, and then even at Women in Film and Television, I had already been a member for at least 2 years before I joined the staff, and had good relationships with staff members, with the community too. Um, and I think that's something that I bring to this role. In the last few years, what I bring is a really wide network, um, and it's something that I really value. And then lastly, I remember a couple years ago, one bit of advice my aunt gave me was, um, be careful of what you sign your name to and how important reputation is. Um, so I've tried to be very mindful of that. I haven't been perfect at it, but really try my best to build and maintain authentic relationships. And that's my voice also when I'm doing social media work, which I don't have to do anymore. I think what's always so powerful are visuals, um, and very important is people seeing themselves reflected, seeing their experiences reflected. Um, those are things that are you can't buy that. You can't buy that feeling. You can't even really manufacture that feeling. Um, Also in terms of giving organizations or art service organizations a platform, a space in which to share their voice and their experiences. I think that will resonate with people. um and One thing, as a disclaimer, I actually encountered the project when I was working at Ryerson, because of the professor there who's involved in it. um and we had that at that time. I was writing an article about her involvement in this project, so how everything just comes back. Um and was so excited to see it, um because so many times we're so isolated as arts and culture organizations. um sometimes we're so buried in our work. We're overwhelmed. We're short-staffed. We're facing all of that, so we don't really get a chance to connect and to gather. Um, and the whole concept of gathering as arts and cultural workers, especially with the communities that we serve, it's it refuels us, you know. And that's one thing that we've missed this year, missed this past year. We haven't had a chance to gather, to share in person, where you could glance across a room and exchange looks with someone, and you know that they fully understand how you're feeling in that moment. Um, when I was working at when I was working at the Playwrights Guild, no, was it then? No, I think it was after. Sorry, my brain now. I think it was after that. I remember going to um, a gathering retreat with different arts and cultural workers. And I think we had it was many arts and cultural workers. And what a beautiful moment that was, for all of us to be in that space and for us to just relax our shoulders, and find comfort in solidarity. And I think this is what projects like this do. Um, because all I saw that like a couple months ago was the mapping aspect of it. I'm like, this is so cool. Honestly, show me an interactive graph and you got me. I'm not so hard to please. um, but I thought it was so beautiful, and even some of the data that you were able to extrapolate at that time, how impactful that could be. But I think the biggest impact would be one of the biggest is for the organizations who feel so isolated to feel a sense of community. The future of our sector, um, it is diverse, it's inclusive, um, it centers wellness and community. Um, it's impactful on many levels: economical, cultural, social as well. Um, we're a vital part of the economy. You know, think about last year, what people found refuge in. It was in the arts. That was the escape. They found it in artists, in cultural work. Um, that's what binds us as a community of people. And I speak about community a lot because that's my foundation with that. I always say, I have so many aunties and uncles, and they're like, "Oh, so that's your mom's sister?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "So that's your dad's sister?" No. Where are they even from? I'm like, this other country on the other side of the world. Then how are you a family? No, they're my aunties and my uncles. Because that's what I grew up in. And so proud to have been embraced by so many people. So there are like huge shifts happening in our industry in terms of conversations around precarity, the gig economy, how we treat workers within our sector, how do we keep people employed, um, and also give them space for their creative practice. um, how do we not replicate the toxicity of corporate culture? Like, these are the things that I'm currently thinking of. um, so that's what I think, in terms the future is going to look so different, even in terms of how funding works. That's going to shift dramatically, because some people are like, we're critiquing the current systems. I think this time that we're in is a renaissance. Um, so that's what I have in terms of the future of the arts and cultural sector. um, and maybe we will do away with some colonial practices as well. It's part of it. We really need to decolonize our sector. Um, and also decenter, um, to dismantle white supremacy within it as well. Now I go to the nice part about advice for people who are coming up in it. I would say be authentic and build real relationships with people, you know. I remember at the end of the day, um, it's people who you're serving, who you're interacting with as well. So ha- having and showing a great sense of humanity will bring you a long way. Um, and also just do the work that you can to find your voice in the sector too, you know. Um, and I think just let it happen organically. Really and truly, it's that. Even just doing that work and thinking about it, thinking about where you want to be, what you have to do to get there. I would say 2013 I wrote down my goals. Um one of was I wanted credits on feature documentary films. I wanted a management position at an arts and cultural organization, and I want to be an executive director. And my next one is to be a management consultant in the arts. And from 2013 to now, I've like crossed off all of those because I looked at it and I did the work along the way. So I say to write down your goals, write them down, like, and so that's what I do. I write it and I put it away somewhere. You know, I put it away, and it's also because that's my personality. I plan a lot, so strategic planning is something I enjoy. I even use the business model canvas for my life planning, so I have a problem. But I would say my big thing is to be authentic and also immerse yourself in the arts. You can't represent artists. You can't work for these organizations if you don't interact with the art that's being created. And you don't just have to think about the one that you represent. Um, like I love all forms of art, you know. And that includes books and movies and paintings and fashion and everything, because you're going to find inspiration anywhere, you know, and come back to your organization and be like, whoa, let me tell you what this museum is doing in Italy, you know, and here's how we can do it, here is how we can do it. um so I think it's just to immerse yourselves in the world of culture as well. You know, I have like all of this behind me, like this blanket my best friend made it, this piece of art my cousin made it, like, and all of the books and everything. But it's just to let it consume you. And I tell people all the time, like, your resume, they already read your resume, so they've already decided that you most likely qualify for the role. So you're not going in there to prove that. um you're going in to see what the culture is like. um because that's what they're assessing with you, is to see how you would fit in with the team. um so don't worry so much about your skills when you're in the interview, unless they put in like some silly test, which I hate, or they put like some kind of test in the interview. um but just just be yourself through it. I've gone to interviews and I've been like, they would be crazy not to hire me. walking with that Walking with that attitude. At my WIFT interview, I told them exactly what the public perception of the organization was. And it was not pretty, you know. And at first I thought, oh my God, they're not gonna hire me because I told them about themselves. But I was I was standing in my truth, and nobody could take that away from you. Oh. And also interview them. Do that. Ask them questions. I wish I knew about a program like this years ago. I would have done it. Um, would have really, really done that. I think it's amazing. And almost anybody that I've hired from an arts and cultural program, they've been my best hires because they understand. Um, I would say to just keep doing the work, you know. The art sector needs young people in leadership roles. And be very clear on that. It's not just young people to do the grunt work of the organization, but need them in leadership roles. That if there's an opportunity for you to even get experience on boards, do it. There's an opportunity for you to be part of a board committee, get in. Like that is huge experience to get so you could grow as a leader and you could be part of these conversations. I'm like, oh my gosh, go on vacation.